Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today is Simone Zoppellaro. He's an Italian journalist and he's currently living in Germany. He knows very well the Caucasus and he has been also specializing on the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. Welcome, Mr. Zoppellaro.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure shared. Thank you for the invitation. I know that you have a limited time in Armenia, but during the Armenia-Azerbaijani war that ended on November 9, the international community was in general passive despite the large number of deaths. So far we have more than 3,000 deaths on the Armenian side. What explains this passiveness?
A lot of influence that Azerbaijan and Turkey, both of them have in the government, in the economic sphere, in Europe, in the US, of course. That's a very big point. The caviar diplomacy is working. They are working to limit the voices of those that are against them, and they're working to promote their influence on many, many levels. We thought, maybe many thought, that this strategy was a bit naive, but certainly during the years they started to realize a project that is really working, and they can really work on influencing different levels of governments, the European institutions. That was really clear, and it's a very complex strategy. Of course, it starts to promote silence on one hand, so trying to keep a low profile in the big medias about what is happening, an aggression, an attack, as it happened at the end of September. On the other hand, promoting, of course, also big infrastructure plans like the Trans-Adriatic pipeline in the south of Italy. This was inaugurated just after the end of the war, and that's very important, of course. Another very interesting thing about Italy specifically is that they are promoting a cultural, they're making a cultural promotion. So, for example, we have very big plans in Rome of monuments restoration that were paid by Azerbaijan directly, both for the Vatican and for the Italian state. That is a very complex strategy. Of course, they're investing a lot on this, but it is working. And of course, there is a deeper problem. The problem is, but we saw it already in the ex-Yugoslavia wars, Europe is not the same anymore. The values we are promoting, the values we believe in as a civil society are not always the values of our governments. That is more interest in business economy nowadays, for sure.
So the values that you share that there is in the European countries, what kind of values are they?
The values of, well, the values that are the base of Italy, and are the fundative values of Italy, of course, are the values we developed after the Second World War, when we had an experience of hyper-nationalism that brought Europe to destruction, of course. These are still the values that are at the base of our constitution, you know. But there's not a reality nowadays anymore. That's too far, and the economic system now is the priority for every government, especially in a time of COVID. And this war was very carefully planned. This 27th of September was a time in which the country I live in, Germany, Italy, and many other countries were completely blocked, not only by pandemics, but also by an economic crisis that is huge. It's probably the biggest crisis we have since decades. And we had the election in the US, we had Belarus, in which also, you know, there was a lot of efforts from both sides, and it was very carefully planned. And that, at the end, produced this disaster we saw in Europe. It's humiliating as an Italian, as a European, to see how small was produced, how solidarity was really limited, especially from the high side, from governments, from big institutions. It is humiliating, but that's not so easy to change it now, and it's too late, of course, because the war is already finished. We had many initiatives from the civil society, but of course you see a wall when you go to a government level or to the high sphere of military and economic system.
We talked about the government level, but let's talk about the media. Did the media cover the war properly and fully, the Italian media, I mean?
We have some very good journalists. One is traveling with me, Daniele Bellocchio, that has reported also for national television, from some media. We had Roberto Trovana, that is another friend, He has made a wonderful work for La Stampa and for others. We had other good journalists, but again, there was a wall. There was a wall in the big media, and it was not easy to have them cover the war in a proper way, because, and it was clear, there are some interest. And you don't only have the influence of Azerbaijan, you have the influence of Turkey. Turkey is fundamental. It's the second army of NATO. It is a very big economic partner for Italy. And they do have also a very big influence in the government. And Armenia was alone. Nobody was supporting. Russia was not supporting. You didn't have governments that were really interested in promoting their side. So there was no balance, and it was very clear.
We both are journalists, and we know that what is important about, in journalism is objectivity, or at least what it looks as close as possible from objectivity and independence from everything, and to cover information. Were the media in Italy influenced by political situation or financial situation that limited them to cover this war properly?
Well, I live in Germany, so I know both experiences. In Germany it was better. The level of coverage of media was higher and more precise. And the parties, not the government, but some opposition parties on the left and also on the right, were more active to promote a more realistic view of the war. On a media level, you know, Italy has its own issues also. We have many papers, we have televisions, as you saw in the case of Berlusconi, but it's just one, that are under the influence of politics and economics. And that made the difference in a negative case also for this war, because we have, as I told you, this oil, we have gas from Azerbaijan, we have Turkey, we have many factors that were limiting directly also the media. And I can't speak about censorship in a direct way, but there were certainly cases of self-censorship in the media, or editorial boards limiting the coverage, I would say, in a very direct way, in order not to cover properly, in order not to give the voice of those civilians, and there were many that were suffering in this case.
We talked about negative things, but there were some positive things happening also in Italy related to this war. Many Italian cities, city councils passed resolutions recognizing the Nagorno Karabakh as a state and condemning the Azerbaijani aggression. It's the example of Milan and Palermo. Can all these small-scale efforts have a larger impact at a state level, for example?
No, I don't think they will have a big impact on a state level, technically, because they don't have a leverage for that. They can't really influence or ask directly the government to intervene or to take a side. But of course they have a positive impact, and the impact they can have is to spread an awareness of this war, an awareness of the fact that there is a urgent need to find a stable solution to this conflict, and to recognize, of course, Artsakh can be one possible solution, although of course we don't even know what are the borders for this recognition. So I think it's a long way to go. I witnessed also a very big solidarity among Italians on many levels. I visited, for example, this project that was made also with Italian money, helping the children from Karabakh here in Yerevan. It's called the Eclipse Armenia. It was made by Grigor Kazarian, that is a professor at the State University of Yerevan. There were many actions on the level of civil society, but it was not enough, and really you could see a wall on a government level, on a big media level, in order to keep a low profile. Of course, Italy is keeping the Madrid principles as a way for diplomacy, but you can see that really they were too close to Azerbaijan. It was not balanced.
At the beginning, we talked also about some agreements, more economic agreements between Italy and Azerbaijan. We'll come back to this now. So Azerbaijani media writes recently, in the beginning of December, that Italy is the first Western country that supports Azerbaijan. And in early December, an Italian delegation visited Baku. They went in Ganja, the second largest city of of Azerbaijan, but also in Ardam, a territory that was handed over by Armenians to Azerbaijani after the war and the ceasefire agreement on November 9. They also talked about an economic agreement, including urban infrastructure, energy, especially gas, agriculture, and tourism. How would you describe in general now Italy's policy and stance in this war in general?
It's a shame, it's definitely a shame what they were doing. I mean, war crimes were committed also by Armenia in Ganja, Agdam. I visited myself twice Agdam, and of course that was also a war crime. But on the other hand, they are supporting a dictatorship against the democracy. And I think this is the key point. How can they support a family that has power in Azerbaijan since 1969? That's absolutely not possible, and they're just doing it for economic purposes. And many of them, I follow them also in interviews on the social media, were really not even able to write the names of the places where they have been. That was really humiliating also as an Italian to be represented by persons that really had no interest even in understanding where they were just repeating the propaganda they heard, and that's very stupid and humiliating. But again, Italy has problems that Germany or other countries don't have, also for corruption, also for the influence of economics into politics, and that was clear in this conflict, but as an Italian it's clear also in other contexts. So, but in any case it doesn't change the fact it was really a shame, and it is a shame because it's really against our values, and it's really also against the big solidarity that a lot of persons have in Italy for Armenia for historic reasons, but also for the fact that what we saw in Armenia was in Karabakh, it was an ethnic cleansing, and many, in any case, despite the media limitations and stuff, they understood what was happening.
So would you say that the economic crisis that is taking place here in the whole world and in Europe too, of course, because of the pandemic, because of many reasons throughout the years, is actually explaining one of the reasons why Azerbaijan gets more support from Europe instead of protecting or supporting a democracy?
I'm a pure pro-European, definitely I'm not a nationalist or stuff. But that's an optimistic view, I think. It's really the fact that in the last decades, I would say after the 80s, the mentality of many politicians in Europe changed. Before that, we were really believing in some values. We believed in what we were promoting, human rights, solidarity. Now, economics, since especially the 90s, is really the key point of our politics. And that's a blind strategy, because of course, it's just one side of the war. It's kind of ideological to believe that just economics can be the key to solve the conflicts or to promote peace and democracy. That's fake, because we have crimes. We had a genocide in Iraq that I witnessed, the one against the Yazidis. I wrote a book about that. And also for that, we didn't see a great solidarity. So there is really a contradiction inside our societies and inside our politics that is now manifesting in Karabakh, but of course it will be manifest also against us, because these problems will be probably a dark part of our future also as Europeans.
You talked about genocide and ethnic cleansing earlier. So, in one of your article in October during the war, you wrote that Europe and Italy are at least letting an ethnic cleansing against Armenians take place. And you say that the world was letting this ethnic cleansing against Armenians take place not only because of the Azerbaijani factor, but also the Turkish factor that you consider having already a foot in Europe. What are the relations between Turkey and Italy?
They are very strong, of course. They are very strong on an economic point of view, and they are very strong on a military point of view, of course, because of NATO. And that was fundamental also in eliminating any balance into this conflict. And yes, it was clear, unfortunately, since the beginning of the war, when I wrote that article, that either a genocide or an ethnic cleansing will occur in the case of Karabakh. It was an ethnic cleansing, it was not a genocide, although a threat for that was real. There was really a risk of having another genocide here. But if, what I saw here in Yerevan, making many interviews in these days, is really we have many displaced persons that lost their homes, and the Armenians were living there since more than 2,000 years. And why should they lose their house, their monuments? Why should children lose their schools? That's cruel. I know it's not the first time. I know also in the 90s it was the case of many Azerbaijanis, but that's absolutely not justification for what is happening today. And that's absolutely no justification for the silence of many institutions and governments in Europe. It is an ethnic cleansing. It's something that really should push the government and societies to be very active. In this period of COVID, it's even difficult to travel, to imagine for many persons something outside their problems they have. Also in Europe we have many families that are really suffering, losing the job, having fears for their future. And of course the time of solidarity is not this time of limitations, pandemics, lockdowns. But again, that's no justification. What happened to the persons, to many Armenians, especially in Karabakh during the last few months, it's something that is much bigger to what is happening to us in Europe. And not putting a stress on that, it means making an act that will also turn back to us. I don't want to speak about karma, of course, but that's really a problem that is not only a problem for Armenians, it's a problem for our societies. And there is something wrong. We have many contradictions inside our European societies. We should really solve this before it's too late also for us.
So, so far you've been talking to me very freely about Turkey relations, Azerbaijan relations, and Armenia, and the conflict and the war. And I know that you are paying the price of your honesty in the sense that you have been threatened because of your opinions and critics about Azerbaijani policies in the field of human rights, but also about the conflict with Armenia. Could you tell us more about it?
Okay, since 2015 I started to be blacklisted first by Azerbaijan, and then I started to be attacked in the net, also publicly. I could remember in 2016 we were making a conference together with the Amnesty International and the Italian Federation of Press about human rights in Azerbaijan, and the Azeri embassy came there and they made such a mess that Italian police had to intervene, take me, an Azeri activist, into a taxi and send us away. It was really a public threat, even filmed and going to the media. Many other attacks were in the net, of course. Death threats also occurred, threats of finish up like Alexander Lapshin occurred, and that's really something that is sometimes unpleasant. On the other hand, I don't want to make it again so special. In Europe nowadays, also myself, I was threatened by the far right, and there are many threats, and hate is really part of our societies nowadays. When you have an opinion, when you really constantly believe in something, often you have problems. So, but I find it personally a motivation to continue, because if they attack you, it means what you are doing has a meaning, and if you attack you and you make a step back, you are covered. So doesn't work at all.
So you say they without saying who are those people, but or organization, or can you tell us who is threatening you exactly, or that's something that should stay?
It's no problem. I mean, the last one was anonymous, so I can't tell you at all, but I reported to the German police where I live, but others were clearly from Azeri side especially, and that's no doubt about that. And at least in one case, but also in other cases, pressures came very directly from the Azeri embassy in Rome, writing to a director of a newspaper that I used to work with, that is a manifesto, denouncing the fact that they had a biased journalist working for them. And attacking, it was very meaningful also an article in which I was denouncing human rights in Azerbaijan. So it's not only the Karabakh conflict, but also the fact of speaking explicitly about human rights in Azerbaijan. Again, the key point is I have nothing against Azeris. I have some Azeris that I like, that I speak with them. They are in the opposition, but there is a dictatorship there, and many persons that are normal persons like me, like you, but they are very influenced by their propaganda. I'm an Italian, I live in Germany, we had also dictatorship in Italy. They are different, every dictatorship is different, but in any case there is a brainwashing occurring to a lot of persons that will be normal person in other cases, but now they are really aggressive, and the hate we have in Azerbaijan and also in Turkey nowadays is really brainwashing, and is really a problem that we risk also to face in our society in Europe. We are facing it already, especially with Turkey. I mean, in Germany we have a very open-minded Turks that are part of also leftist parties that are very vocal against Erdogan. But we have also many persons, Muslims, that are influenced by Erdogan and his view of hate that is also spreading in Europe, not only in the Caucasus.
All right, and last question, you plan to go to Artsakh. What do you plan to work on there precisely?
Of course, the human rights situation and aftermath of war are the key points. So to interview victims of war, we did it already here in Yerevan since 6 days, and to try to understand how this situation will continue also. The very bad fact about this treaty that was signed on the 9th of November, it's no peace again. It's 30 years we have a war here, and again we have a treaty that is just a ceasefire. Not only, if we read the 9 points of this treaty, it's really not stable. It's really not stable for many reasons. It's not clear what this corridor of to Nakhchivan will be. It's not clear how you can sustain the fact that Shushi is on the one side, and on the Armenian side you have Stepanakert. They are too close. One is a hill dominating the other. It's really not stable, and again there is no recognition of the right of the Armenians to stay there, and this will produce, I'm afraid, inevitably, if not another war, certainly many other conflicts. And we saw it already after they signed the treaty. There was an attack against 2 villages, and the fact that the Russians are there could be positive, but of course we don't know also the mission of these peacekeepers. Are they really there to help the population, or they are just there to pressure governments for the Russian side? That's not clear, and there are too many question marks, unfortunately, in the situation there. And that's really not human, because the last thing every government, I don't want to blame just one, also the European governments, the last thing they are taking care of is the perspective of the civil population. That is really a disaster.
Thank you very much for this talk.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching, and continue to follow CivilNet.